everybody, and welcome to The Brand Called You. So, listen, yesterday my neighbor invited me over for coffee, and she said to me, "Can I tell you a secret?" And I said, "Yeah." And she told me the most delicious gossip about a mutual friend of ours, and we laughed so hard. And I suddenly realized that there are two kinds of secrets, There are those that are just wonderful, like the kind you get on a playground as a kid when a classmate whispers to you, or the kind your neighbor gives you while you're having coffee. And then there's the other kind, which isn't so nice, like the one I grew up with. I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor, and my mother never talked about the war, but it was a secret, and it was a noisy secret because we knew it, but we didn't know it. And it really affected our lives. Well, our guest today, Miryam Kabakov, knows a lot about secrets too, because Miryam grew up in an Orthodox Jewish environment, a home, a school, and she had to keep the fact that she was gay secret, at least for a little while, until she did remarkable things with her life. So many, many years later, Miryam was a co-founder and an executive director of an organization called Eshel, which is the largest organization supporting LGBTQ plus Orthodox Jewish individuals and their families. And she really is helping them to both connect back to their religious communities or find peace with their families. She also founded an organization that I knew very well from when I lived in New York called the Orthodox, which was a support group for lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Orthodox women. And she's done a million and one other things as well. I mean, she's been a Jewish educator, a fundraiser, and even an editor of an anthology, which I want to hear about. But I'm just really, really excited to have you here, Miryam. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's wonderful to be with you here. And you didn't mention like one of the more important things that I'm
Tell
doing
me.
right now, which is playing pickleball with you. And I have to say, because I actually think this is like an important thing. Um, you and I had never met before. We ended up on the same side of the court. And I had just gotten back from Israel and I was very jet lagged. And I was like, oh, I'm so jet lagged. Forgive me if I can't play well. And you were like, oh, I'm so jet lagged. I came from somewhere else. Forgive me if I'm not playing well. And you said, where were you? And I said, I was in Israel. And then we just like launched into this whole thing about Jewish food. And I don't know if you know this. I mean, you are an amazing pickleball player. So
Thank
like
you.
it was probably that. But you and I were just really starting getting into it about
We
like
were annoying our opponents, weren't
we were
we?
really annoying the other team, and we were talking about like babka and herring and bagels and all these things. You're going to go to Brooklyn, and you're going to bring it back, and every time we would be like talking really loudly about the Jewish food, we would like win a point. I don't know if you noticed that, and we creamed the other side, and we did
No,
really
I didn't.
well. And they thought, I think they were really like, "What is going on over there? These women cannot stop talking about food."
No, but how I didn't know that. I didn't know that. But I will tell you that
Yeah.
what I noticed, I didn't remember we were talking about food. What I noticed was your incredible, first of all, you're aggressive, but in the best way possible, like
Oh.
not like going after the balls in the right time, improvisational, sensing where the problem parts are, going after it. And I thought to myself, oh my God, in some ways it's a complete metaphor for the way you've lived your life, right? Which is, not retreat. No, I mean, so many people I always think people live their lives the way they play their pickleball. And I think and
Mm.
not knowing you, I would just, I mean, it
Beautiful.
makes perfect sense that you took what could have been such a detriment and such a painful, experience, and you kind of saw the openings and transformed it, and now you're like changing all these lives. I find it very interesting when you can take what should be and could be adversity and kind of
Yeah.
just transform it, and I feel like that's what you did. So I kind of
Thank
want to
you.
understand,
Well,
for our viewers that don't
yeah,
understand, how complex it is to be gay in an Orthodox Jewish community, could you kind of just give us a little bit of context and background?
absolutely. So I want to tell you, you started out by talking about secrets. So that is really interesting because it takes a tremendous amount of effort to keep a secret.
Mhm.
And the bigger the secret, the harder it is, and the more strain it puts on your life. And you're always like aware that you're not saying something and you're bottled up, and it just kind of wears you down. And so it's not healthy, I think, for the most part, to keep secrets. I think it's bad for the nervous system, it's bad for our bodies and for our souls. And so that is really what people need to understand, that when somebody is born into an Orthodox community, and then it becomes clear to them that they are LGBTQ, right? But nothing is changing outwardly necessarily. So no one else is seeing what they're discovering inside. And as they're discovering it, they're also realizing, for the most part, that they can't really share that part of themselves. So then they become a secret keeper, and then they have to make that decision at some point to share it or not. So we work with a lot of people that are not sharing that outwardly to their family, their friends, their community, but they tell us. And so like we're the first point of relief, so we have a warm line. People call. Very often it's the first call, the first time they've ever shared that secret. And it's very powerful. And then we try to like get them connected to other people, because once you meet someone else who has a similar story, then you all of a sudden you don't feel like you're alone and you're the only one out there. And then slowly you're forming a community with people like you. So it's a very special kind of subset of Orthodoxy, and it's we often share traits with people who have secrets in other parts of Orthodoxy, not being LGBTQ, but like we were talking before offline about, a friend of yours, and so that's one thing that's really important for people to understand, that it's
Let me
something
just
that,
stop you for a second though.
sure.
Why the need for secrecy? What's the price that one would pay for not keeping it a secret?
So great question. The price is probably in some cases getting kicked out of the community and not being part of it anymore. Some people get married very young in ultra-Orthodox places. They'll be getting married, starting to talk about marriage at the age of 18 or 19. And then by 20 or 21, they're married, they might have children at that point. So what they're risking, but it's like not clear to them that they're inside, that they're LGBTQ, like they're not everyone's able to process it quickly enough to like not go on that, train of like marriage and children. But even if they do know, there's also sometimes no alternative. I mean, we're talking more about the ultra Orthodox world. So what they risk is losing everything, basically losing their families, maybe losing the potential to see their children again, which is really one of the most heartbreaking parts of this story. And their livelihood, whatever it might be, if it's inside that community, and so if they get kicked out of the community, they have to figure out, how am I going to make it outside in the real world, or the outside world.
So, is a large percentage of the members of Eshel married with kids?
Not a large percentage, but there's a nice percentage, a good percentage. We're so as we've been doing this for 15 years, people are coming out younger and younger in the general population and in the Jewish Orthodox population. So that means that people are reaching out to us younger, and it's like before they've hit that moment in their lives.
Yeah.
So we're getting people, earlier. And I would say also like in the modern Orthodox community, where they have a lot more access to the internet, the outside world, culture that's not their own. And it's not like entirely forbidden or taboo to go into those cultures and to be in the world, it's much less fraught, to come out. It's still a thing. It's still something that rattles the family and rattles the community. But the risk of being kicked out of your community is less. Now it's more about, how does the community bring you back or hold you? And that's where Eshel sits. Eshel sits in the place of trying to make it so that when people come out in an Orthodox place, a community, synagogue, that they don't have to leave, that we're prepping the Orthodox world to receive them, because kids are going to come out, and they're going to start coming out younger and younger and more as, culture changes and makes it more like fine, in the outside world. So we're trying to get the Orthodox world ready for that. And we do education, we do a lot of outreach to Orthodox rabbis to have this conversation with them before somebody comes out in their community, or once we know they have come out. Yeah. So I don't know if I've answered that question.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean, it begets so many other questions. I do have a kind of religious or biblical question.
Sure.
As somebody who loves to study Torah, they mention homosexuality pertaining to men as an infraction. I've never seen lesbianism mentioned in the Bible, and I wonder, does that mean that there's less of a stigma surrounding gay women, gay women?
There is much less of a stigma because it's not explicit in the Torah, like any sexual acts between women. It's not like stated very clearly like it is in Leviticus around men. So men have lot more baggage. It's harder for them to sort of get over feeling like they are sinning or doing the wrong thing. For women, there are some texts that are rabbinic texts that talk about women, and that's what my anthology is based around, this understanding that Maimonides had, way back in the 1100s, where he actually identified a group of women in his community who were lesbian, obviously there was no language for that, but just like they were having relationships with each other,
Yeah.
and he basically says like there is this subculture of women, and don't let your wives don't let them socialize with your
That's where
wives.
your title comes from,
That's
right?
where the
With
title comes
Keep
from,
Your Wives
right?
Away. I couldn't figure that out.
Exactly. It's my imaginary conversation I'm having with Maimonides, where he's saying, "Oh yeah, you have to keep your wives away from these women," and and basically that is sort of what he says in his book, and so the this like, but also the actual sin of being a lesbian has nothing to do with the sex act between two women. It actually has to do more with whether the woman is then going to be able to marry a priest or a high priest, I think. Right.
Or,
Maybe
or,
just
or
a
bear
priest.
children, maybe, right? Or bear children.
Not necessarily about children, no. It's just whether she's considered still marriageable. So it has nothing to do with what happens between the two women, really. So, and it's punishable by like you get like lashes, like I don't think anyone ever, well, I don't know how
I,
often that happened, but it's much less. So to answer your question, yeah, I think women fly under the radar a little bit more, and it's easier for them psychically, I think, to adjust.
I mean, you kind of wonder what was happening biblically at the time that these passages were included. Obviously there was a lot going on, or they wouldn't have felt the need to include it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it was in other cultures, and it wasn't frowned upon in other cultures. So it was a way maybe
Right.
to differentiate. Also, my colleague, Rabbi Steve Greenberg, writes a book about this. And his thesis, I'm not going to summarize it that well, but basically, that what the rabbis were warning against was a violent sexual act, that it was considered like, transgressing somebody's body in a violent way. So, and that's really but that's what the sin is.
Well, so let me just bring it back to today. A lot of fear surrounding it still, but you make some really compelling arguments as to why it isn't actually in many ways it's banning, or creating a stigma around um, being LGBTQ in an Orthodox community is antithetical to the spirit of Torah law. Like you talk about a
Hmm.
lot of the biblical messages that support your organization and the message behind it, right? Such as
Yeah.
community and
Yeah, so yes, and what we also really focus on is like the in modern Orthodoxy, there's this idea of how science and religion are not opposed to each other, or just like what we know about the human condition. And in the end of the day, when somebody cannot change their sexual orientation or their gender identity, then what? Is the answer to just like abandon everything else that you holds you in your life, like your spiritual life, your religious life? And so we maintain that that's not fair to take everything away from somebody, because they're not fitting in this one way, and that's not what God wants. Like who knows what God really wants, but like we believe that it's not fair to have somebody have to leave their religious community. It's not really healthy for them, and it's not good for their family. And so we work a lot on keeping families together And in the end of the day, like when, I say to sometimes the parents, and I say to myself as a parent of two children, when you win a power struggle, what have you won? So like if we work a lot with parents, in fact, our parent retreat is coming up on April 30th and May 3rd. I'll give a little plug. We
That's
still
actually
have
a great line. That's a great line. When you win
yeah.
a power struggle, what have you really won?
Yeah, because, the parents are trying to get their kids to fit into a certain mold. And when the kid comes out, it's really, really hard. And it's also like really I mean, I can only speak for myself, but also what I see is that the pain point is that the connection between the child and the parent is lost, can be lost. And you mostly just want to stay connected to your child and make sure that they are safe and that they're healthy. And yes, of course, you want them to stay religious and you want them to, you probably want things for them that you may not end up getting all of. But when we work with parents, we sort of do some like triage on like what is it that you want and what do you need and what does your child need and what does your child need to stay connected to you. So sort of like letting go of the power, trying to maintain and hold strong over your child's life because we're not in control ultimately, um, and just listening to them and seeing if what they want and need is something that you can give to them in some way. Um,
Must be a kind of a beautiful
yeah.
thing when you turn somebody around a bit, no? Their perspective.
Um, it is beautiful when we see parents reuniting with their children because of the work that we do with them, and that happens quite a bit. There's also a lot of peer support in our parent community because no one has written a manual on how to parent, right? No one gave you that when the baby came, right? So, and really nobody gave us a manual about how to parent an LGBTQ child within Orthodoxy. Nobody's writing that book except for our parents. They're writing it for themselves. And so that's why these retreats are really important. We get people together so that they can, peer teach each other like what worked, what didn't work, and we've learned a lot watching them and listening to them. They've taught us a tremendous amount about parenting.
I kind of want to go back to your own experiences. Like, tell me about how your secrets and how it affected you and this how did your evolution with your own parents, for example?
Yeah, so, um, my parents were, they themselves were late bloomers in their life. So they started like having children much later in life. And so they were different in their own community, in their own generation. And, they kind of like marched to the beat of their own drummer. So they had that perspective, but they also grew up in a world where to be gay was a sickness. And, it wasn't going to lead you to lead a healthy life,
Orthodox or non-religious, it was considered, yeah,
no matter what it was. Yeah, yeah. Not even forget the religious piece of it. Just
right.
in society, it just wasn't like it was a sad. If it happened to you if it so happened to you that you were gay, that was a sad thing. So it meant that you were going to have a sad life. That's what both of my parents thought because they grew up watching what was going on in the 1950s and, the lavender scare. And then my dad in the 80s with the AIDS crisis, like he was a
Right.
doctor. So he saw that whole thing. And it was sad. It was hard. It was not like there was no rainbow. That was before the rainbows. And so it took me a long time to bring them along. And they were in a lot of pain about me and a lot of denial.
Well, did
And
you know yourself? I mean, did you acknowledge it to yourself?
yeah, I think by the time it was a little bit after high school that I sort of, a few years, it was like when I was in college, at the end of college, I sort of, was done trying to like change and trying to like live a straight Orthodox life. It was like, I just kind of was like, okay, time is running out here. You've tried a lot of different things and none of it is
But how
working.
did you know it just wasn't like the Nebby guys? How did you know it was your actual sexuality? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you just know, it's no, I mean, yeah, could it have been the Nebby guys?
I guess
Lisa,
what I'm
you're
asking
making
is
me
like,
question everything.
no,
Just
I
kidding.
guess what I'm really asking you did you really have an inclination from a much earlier age, but just push it down or?
Yeah, no, I totally did. Um, yeah, no, I did. I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of fluidity with sexuality. That's what's
Yeah,
confusing for people,
yeah,
right? There's like
yeah,
that long spectrum, and where very few people are one thing or the other. And
right.
so I think that makes it confusing. But in the end of the day, I knew that my soulmate was in a woman.
Yeah,
Like that's what I knew. I just knew
yeah.
that spiritually I couldn't be with a man. It had to be a woman. And I met somebody who was really, thank God, a wonderful person who lived the same kind of religious life that I did. So that
Oh.
was a very good match right there. And somebody that my parents were very proud of. And
I'm amazed you wanted to stick with Orthodoxy, given that they didn't want to stick with you.
yeah, I love the way you put that. So so I grew up in a very special place in that I was taught that nobody was allowed to take it away from me. You
Mm.
know, it was mine, it belonged to
Who taught
me.
you that?
It was just a modern Orthodox day school that was very much modern and in the real world. And it was not necessarily like part of the written doctrine, but my teachers, I had a lot of wonderful teachers in my yeshiva, and they were authentic human beings who had grown up in different places, not only Orthodox places. And so I think there was a lot of authenticity. And I saw that. And I also just, my parents were incredibly wonderful people, and they were very accepting in many, many ways. And so I knew that ultimately it would be okay with them if they understood that this was who I was. And that was part of what, for me, the struggle was getting them to see that that is who I was. They didn't think that's who I was. I did date boys. They saw that. It was like, they were like, wait, what about that guy you were dating all of last year? So like that's always a moment for a parent to say, wait, I thought I saw this and now you're telling me that. But I just, there was just a lot of love, thank God, in my life, in my family. And so I felt loved, and I felt like God loved me, and my religion would love me ultimately. And it wasn't anyone else's business anyway. And I love my religious life. I love it. It gives me a lot, even when I have my moments of doubt. It's the rituals, it's the song, it's the food. As you know, Lisa, you and I bonded over that on the pickleball court.
Yeah.
And it's the culture, and it's our people, and I tell my children, I'm like, wherever you are in the world, if it's Shabbat, go to the shul, that's wherever you are in the world, and ask someone to have you over for dinner, and it'll happen for you, or something like that. And that's a magical thing about who we are. We're a very, very, very big family, and we're always there for each other.
Do you get buy-in from the rabbis now within Orthodoxy?
So we actually have a project where we do a dialogue with Orthodox rabbis,
Hmm.
and we have 300 plus on our list. It's called the Welcoming
Wow.
Shoals Project,
Wow.
and not it's not like every rabbi is like 100%. Oh my God, amazing! Of course, everything you're telling us, fine, fine. This, we'll welcome. We will embrace the person just like we embraced them before they came out to us. They struggle. Nothing is perfect, but they're at least in dialogue with us about,
Is that
you
new?
know,
Is that a relatively new thing since you started?
we started it after a few years of beginning Eshel, like maybe after 5 years, 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it's been going on for almost like 10 years now. And 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 what we do is LGBTQ people, we're North America. We cover North America. So we get a lot of phone calls asking us, where can I go to shul? I'm going to be traveling, or I'm thinking of moving. Is there an Orthodox community that will welcome me? So we have this list, and we have these people who need a place. And so we try to match people, and we do some very successful matching of LGBTQ people within Orthodox communities.
So there
Um,
are certain more friendly Orthodox communities than others.
yeah, absolutely. And friendly in different kinds of ways. Do you know what I mean?
No,
Um,
I don't.
like some some synagogues will say, oh, 100% everybody's welcome. Every Jew is welcome. Like that's not even a question. But then we say, well, how are they welcome? Like, there are certain ritual things that happen to somebody after they come out, especially men. If they were leading services or reading from the Torah, and then they come out to the rabbi, is the rabbi going to let them continue to do that? And
Really?
right, really? No halachic reason. There's no Jewish legal reason
Oh,
that that shouldn't
awful.
be
Awful.
horrible. No, it's terrible. It's really bad. This is not good. We are trying to change
Yeah.
this. And we're trying to raise awareness with the rabbis that they hear and understand what that feels like. And so, so we ask those very sensitive questions and we say, like, if somebody comes out, will they still be able to lead or to lane or, on Yom Kippur, if they led services, will you let them continue? If they had a child with, a same-sex partner, or if they transitioned, what side of the mechitza could they sit on? So there's like a lot
What
of,
happens if they have a child? Just the child is not responsible for their parents' sexuality, right? Like the child
you
is
would
totally,
imagine that that would be people's understanding.
but
That
it's not
is,
true.
it's not always true. Like some kids have gotten rejected from going to day schools because they have gay parents.
Oh,
I know. It's because, they don't want to upset the apple cart of the parent community or other parents will freak out. So it's like, who knows why people make these decisions, but it's often, if they feel like it's going to hurt the ecosystem of the day school
is it
or
financial largely? A lot of these decisions?
there's a mass exodus when there's a gay kid
Yeah.
or there's a gay couple who has a kid in the school, like parents will threaten to leave. So yeah, that's always a consideration. And I don't think that's not good, but I can't judge. It's hard to keep a day school going. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying how horribly painful for the parents, for the kid, for the kid's
But
friends.
so let me ask you, so your organization, does it largely get supported by Jews that are not Orthodox? Because I could imagine it would be harder to fundraise from the very communities that are, that you're working
Yeah.
to sort of help educate.
You're asking like all of the very juicy and fundamental questions, so I really appreciate that.
Sorry.
No, it's good. It's great. In the very beginning, we were having a hard time fundraising. We were like in a black hole
Yeah,
of
because
fundraising.
basically you're the very
Well,
community you want to. Yeah.
exactly. So like, let's just lay it all out there. The Orthodox community was not going to fund us
No,
at all.
no.
The LGBTQ community did not understand, what we were about and why. And then the general Jewish population of funders were like, well, do you want to remain Orthodox? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard,
Right.
right?
Because like there's a gay synagogue in New York that's not Orthodox,
Correct.
but
Yeah,
they're familiar with those customs that they cherish.
exactly, for sure. And that's a very special place for many people.
Yeah.
Most of our community could come to Eshel cannot or don't feel comfortable in that kind of a synagogue.
Right.
It's basically, I think it's Reconstructionist or Reform
Right.
style.
Right.
It's not familiar to them. It's not their spiritual home. It's interesting and it's fun, but it's like not the place that they want to go to every Shabbat. Just not. It's not what they grew up with.
It's sort of the irony occurs to me is one of the things that I don't like about Orthodox religion is that women do not get to fully participate. But it seems like a double whammy that they're willing to go to a synagogue that excludes women from fully participating in the way I would like to, and yet are also excluded in their own way. I mean, it's just a funny thing for
Yeah,
me.
and I think, when you grow up Orthodox as a woman, I can't speak for all Orthodox women, but I never felt excluded. I always
Yeah.
felt very much part of things, and I just wasn't doing certain things, but I was
Right.
doing certain other
Right.
things. So like
Right.
that was never a thing for me. I know a lot of women do feel that way once they
Yeah.
get a chance to fully participate in the
Yeah.
service, like leading the service and all
Yeah.
that. They never want to go back. And so that's hard. But
Yeah. But
yeah.
you started to say that most of your fundraising these days still comes from the secular world,
So
or
no, so here's what I want to say that in the beginning it was like nobody was funding us, right? It was we had a few angel
yeah,
starter uppers, honestly. And the first big grant that we got was from a Protestant minister who had a family foundation and who was doing this kind of work in the Christian community.
Mhm.
And she noticed us and she said, I want to fund you. I see what you're doing and it's very special and it's very important. So that was like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then we just realized, well, like we were talking before offline, Lisa, like there are so many issues that this brings up for people that have nothing to do necessarily with
Right.
Judaism
No.
or LGBTQ. It's
Right.
like it's just
Exclusion.
about it's a lot. It's exclusion, it's belonging, it's community, it's health, what happiness. It's like a lot of things.
Yeah.
So that's where we were like, oh, and then we started noticing other people just cared about what we were doing, nothing having to do with them. Over time, we sort of like, made our case with the general Jewish community of funders that this is an important thing that people need to pay attention to. And it took a while, but now I think we're seeing a lot more support from the general Jewish community, which is good, the funding community. And then we also have been working a lot with individuals, and some of those individuals are major donors as individuals, and they care a lot about what we do. And so, yeah, thank God, you just have to keep going. I believed people would see the importance, people would feel it. I meet people randomly, strangers that I've never really spoken to, who said, just last weekend, this happened to me. He said, my parents reached out to you and that you connected them with a therapist. You meaning Eshel, like our counseling team, connected them with a therapist that really, really helped, them understand me. And yeah, so like we're reaching out, we're reaching far and wide, and that's really great.
Are you thinking of branching out to like smaller areas outside of the Northeast?
Yeah, so we do actually have chapters in different parts of the country. Right now we have a chapter in Atlanta, Florida, Silver Spring,
Great.
Baltimore, and a
Great.
couple of more places. And people
Yeah.
often want to start a chapter, and we support them. We also happen to have a parent chapter, a very vibrant one in Israel for
Wow.
English
Wow.
speaking parents. So it's
Yeah.
Anglos. And I
Yeah.
just came back from our big first retreat in Israel for parents
Yeah.
of LGBTQ folks who are Anglo. So that was fun,
I guess because I can't believe how long we've gone on. We have to stop now. But I guess the way I'd want to end is the way we began, which is what happens when people can share their secrets? How do they get transformed? What kind of transformation do you see when a secret is out there?
Yeah. So we see people becoming their full selves and then able
Mm,
to move on and able to
wow.
really um,
Yeah.
find out what they actually want in their lives.
Wow.
And what we often see is that when people, they come out, they get over a lot of the hangups that they carry with them around being LGBTQ, that they can find a place to be as a religious Jew, because we've worked on that a lot for them. Um, they find a full community of friends and peers, and then they find a way back to their family of origin, or of understanding their family of origin, reconnecting with them. And it's very beautiful. So we're like unifying families, we're bringing people into their own new family, and also not having them feel alienated from their spiritual home, which is really our purpose. So as a result of our work, more people are remaining observant. They don't have to choose between their identity and their faith, and they can really become one and feel like one. And then there are those people who, you and I also talked about this, like who have left the fold of Orthodoxy, but somehow they come back and they come back to us because they get it. They're like, oh, I can really be who I am with you, and I can still have that flavor of like what I had when I was growing up, and I don't have to choose. So that's what we see, and it's
Are
the
you guys
most
thinking of,
gratifying thing.
do you have your own kavarot, like your own, prayer groups that you're starting as well?
So that's an interesting question. We we very much didn't want to start a gay Orthodox synagogue.
Mm,
Like that's not. it's not necessarily what we saw
Right.
people wanted. They want to just be in their Orthodox community
Right.
that they
Right.
want to be in. They don't want to
Right.
stand out as like, oh, I want to just go pray with only gay
Of course,
people.
it's about integration and
It's
acceptance.
about
Yeah.
integration, but having said that, there is something special to be, with the LGBTQ
Yeah.
folks, at least once a year on our retreats.
Right.
It's a very affirming thing. But no, I wouldn't say like there's one prayer circle in New York that we have helped bring together that is like that. But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we want people to be
Amazing.
integrated. That's why we're
Yeah.
working on the
Yeah.
Orthodox community.
I mean, I'm just fascinated by what you do and so impressed. And I wish you like continued success. It's just really special. And
Thank you so
thank you
much,
for sharing with
Lisa.
everybody what you're up to. And I can't wait to hear about your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for having me. It's
Thank
been
you. It
great
was
to
really
talk
a
to you,
pleasure.
and
Okay.
hope to
Bye,
see you
Miriam.
soon. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.